Hey, welcome back to the Lightspeed Lawn Care Marketing Podcast. I am here at the Lawn and Landscape Society event in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, sitting down with Naylor, the lawn care rookie. We've commandeered Paul's podcasting desk here. We threw him out of the room so that we could record a quick episode for you guys. So thanks for tuning in.
Yeah, and thanks for having me, Cody.
Yeah, man, thanks for being here.
Thanks,
Thanks for joining me at the commandeered desk.
Right, yeah. Well, I mean, you helped put it together, so it's only fair.
Yes, I was in here while Paul assembled things.
Right, yeah.
Interrupting him to film a YouTube short.
Right.
Yeah, so I thought that we would talk today just a little bit about we were talking on Green Industry Podcast with, like a big roundtable sort of situation about what you are doing, like systems wise, to improve your processes for the spring rush.
Yeah.
And so I thought it would be cool to kind of break those down a little bit. Some of the stuff that I, have trouble speaking to as a marketer and not as a lawn care business owner.
Yeah. Well, so the biggest thing for me is, as everyone in the industry knows, the spring rush is called the spring rush for a reason, right? So because it's just a rush, it's extremely fast paced. As soon as the weather breaks, everybody just starts going crazy on phone calls, emails, all that kind of stuff. So, in the beginning, I had no idea really how to mitigate that, but as through social media and trial and error, and as new things develop, whether it be, REMs or call services, all these different things, to try and put systems in place to make it a little more manageable, because it gets super stressful when you get all of this work that comes in constantly, or all the requests for work, I should say, and you're trying to do the work you already have. If you aren't just starting out brand new and you already have clients and work lined up, you're trying to get that work done, your phone's ringing off the hook, emails blowing up, maybe you got messages on Facebook or other platforms that you might be on, and it gets really overwhelming. So, I know for me, every year, the last several years, I try to, channel that so that it's not uncontrollable for me. Like, what can I take off my plate? What can I delegate? What can I just try to shift so that I'm not so overwhelmed? So, like I used in the Green Industry Podcast example last year, the biggest thing was I used a call service so that my business phone number is connected to them, and they have a script and all these things that are all, it's like a whole process to get everything established and what to do in what scenario. And some of it's still a little bit of a learning curve as you get the calls. But then once you get it dialed in a short amount of time, then they're taking all the calls, handling everything. I don't get I get notified of every single call. I get a log, an email at the end of the day, or throughout the day, I think it was, however you want it to be structured. And then, only the things that I told them that I need to be notified for are the things they got notified for. Like if an employee is calling me or a customer's calling me back, there are certain things where they would know, okay, let me connect you. And then they would just ring my phone back, and they would call me.
That's cool.
Yeah, they would call me and be like, hey, this is so-and-so from such and such. And, we have so-and-so on the line, or whatever. We have Susie on the line, or, your employee, wanted to see if he's working tomorrow, or whatever, just whatever random things. And then there was follow-up things where I would have to then follow up that wasn't for that, just like any customers that actually met all the criteria, like they're in our service area, they're asking for services that we offer, and okay, now they want a quote. So I could just send them a quote, or if they wanted to talk first, I could just contact them, however information, and they got all their information. So like sometimes me being on the fly constantly in the past, I would sometimes neglect to get all the information, like I would have their phone number if they call me already, but I would forget to get their email or this or that or whatever. And then I'd have to call them back or contact them another way. And that was a lot of wasted time. And those minutes add up, especially when you're busy trying to cut grass or do landscape projects, putting down mulch. You're busy doing the work and your phone's ringing off the hook, and it's, it gets really stressful. So to have that resource, just as one of many examples, it really helped take a lot of workload and stress off of my plate, because a lot of workload off my plate and stress off my shoulders, because as my phone rang 80 something times that first month in April, where it really gets out of control in Central Virginia, where I live now, I just knew my phone rang and then boom, it just went straight to them. And it was a huge relief, because I didn't have to worry about handling all that. And it wasn't until later, where if it filtered down to me, then I would follow up with quotes and stuff. Yeah. But half of the stuff was just a whole bunch of people calling from different areas, asking for different services. And they just handled it and said, sorry, we don't, they had a whole professional script, and just basically told them, sorry, we're we don't offer that service, or we're not in this area or whatever. And I never even have to dealt with it. So it was just huge, to not have to deal with all that. So that's just one of many ways that I try to control what I can control in the spring rush. You're going to get tons of people contacting you no matter what. The longer in business you are, the more you get contacted, the more marketing you do, the more you get contacted, and so on. But you're bound to get contacted somehow or another. And that was a huge headache for me of how to control all that, because I just never had enough time. I'd be like, we'd be done for the day, and then I'd be sitting in the truck at the end of the day by myself, missing dinner, going through emails and voicemails and trying to contact people, and then doing quotes. And it got out of hand, and when you're a solo owner operator, it might be a little bit easier in the beginning to control that. You're like, oh, I only get a dozen calls or whatever, but you need to think ahead so that, if you are trying to grow, when you get to that point, it gets out of control, and you get 80 something calls, in a month. It gets kind of overwhelming.
Well, and a lot of guys will talk about, my goal is to double the size of the business this year, triple the size of the business. And if that is your goal, and then
you don't have a way
and you don't have anything in place to handle it, if your call volume suddenly tripled because that was your goal, how are you dealing with it?
Right.
And when you start asking these questions is when you run into, we want to triple the size of the business. What's your marketing budget? $20?
Yeah. That's not going to work.
Yeah. So thinking about everything that goes into your goals. And that's why it's important to have, for the spring rush, you need to have, what are you trying to hit? What's your revenue goal? How many new customers is that? We talked about this on our YouTube channel last week, I think, yes, at some point in the past. We talked about figuring out your 2023 marketing strategy, because it's going to be dependent on how many new customers do you need to add, what's your revenue goal, and how much do you need to spend to get there based on what you spent last year to get new clients in the door.
Yeah.
One thing I will say about organizing systems in your business is that I saw the exact same thing that you did. I took the thing that took the most time away from me, actually helping clients last year, and it was fielding calls and emails from, kind of warm leads, but not ready to make a purchasing decision leads. And so that all those emails happen automatically now. It asks the follow-up questions that I need to know to be able to, know, is this someone we could work with? All of that. Everything that I was doing, I don't remember where I heard it, but I heard someone say that this third time you write the same email, you should figure out a way to automate it.
Right. There you go. That's a good one.
And, I didn't listen to that advice for a long time and sent the exact same email. I would copy and paste it.
Right. Still, the task of copying and pasting, it's a lot.
Yeah. And so now everybody that contacts us hears back in 10 minutes.
Nice. Yeah. Automation. That's the way to go.
Yeah.
And something I wanted to say too is my motto for a long time has been think big, stay small. So even though I'm not $1 million business, and I'm not actually even aspiring to have, 10 crews and be $1 million business or whatever that looks like, I still want to kind of think like $1 million business and incorporate whatever I can into my smaller business, So and in a lot of ways, that's phone, having a call service or automating different things like that, so that you can just be forward thinking and prepare for any kind of growth, whether that be $500,000 growth or $1 million growth or whatever. You want to prepare and put those systems in place. So I've always been about think big, stay small. Before I had employees, what would that even look like? How would I pay them? And ask these questions and follow up with peers and mentors and figure out, okay, QuickBooks has a whole payroll thing. That's pretty legit. I don't have to necessarily get a payroll service. It's easy enough for me to do myself, or my wife, who's a bookkeeper for everywhere that she's worked over her lifetime, payroll services, she can do it, using QuickBooks. But I was always thinking about these things way ahead of time before I actually needed them, because it's a lot easier to do that than go backwards and be like, oh man, we just exploded our growth and now we don't know anything about all these things, and we're chasing our tail kind of thing. So that's always been my motto, and it doesn't always work out perfectly, but I always try to think ahead of where I could be and what do I need to do to get there and prepare for that and so on. So
yeah, and when you're actually thinking about those things and building toward them, they become a lot more possible than when they're just, wishes in one hand.
Right. Yeah. Well, Paul had asked me on his podcast too. He said, because I came from retail, he was like, is the spring rush comparable to Black Friday and the holiday season? And I said, it is a lot comparable to that. But the biggest takeaway I think from that is planning. So, we planned for like almost a year, it seemed like. We'd planned for months and months to really get everything kind of ironed out, come up with a strategy, and, reflecting on the previous holiday season, what went well, what didn't, like how can we fit, the company obviously would have their own new ways of doing certain things. Oh, this is how we're going to manage the lines. This is going to make the registers faster, blah, blah, blah. And we'd come up with a whole plan all the way down to the individual store levels, and that would help us execute things better. Of course, things get wacky and don't always work out perfect, and you got to just think on the fly. But the more you plan, the better you'll be. And that's the same thing with the whole spring rush for our industry. It's like, if you can plan ahead of time, like, okay, what has been a big headache? Phone calls, or, reaching back out to people, or, this particular service or this service area is just too difficult for us to deal with. Okay, let's cut them out before the season even starts. Give them an opportunity to find someone to replace them if you don't have a referral already for them, and, start figuring that out before you get to the spring rush. So have a plan so that hopefully you can make it as less stressful as possible and be as profitable as you can.
Yeah. I know one of the huge pain points especially on the maintenance side of the business, is getting employees in the door.
Yeah.
Do you have any hiring tips that you want to give people?
Honestly, the biggest thing that I found is just never give up. Like, if you need employees and you want to grow your business, then just don't stop. Like, you just have to be relentless. And sooner or later you will find good people, and then you just got to do your part to keep them, and keep them happy, pay them well, try and build a good company culture, whether that's just you and a couple of people or a whole, multiple crews or whatever that looks like. You can still adjust that accordingly and have a good working atmosphere and environment, because people leave more for the bad environment than bad pay. People are willing to stay for less money if they enjoy where they work. But they
won't even think to look.
Right.
If they're
right.
Not
they're just they're happy with their job. But if they're getting paid a ton of money, but they feel terrible going to work every day, then they're willing to just go somewhere else for less pay sometimes just to be happy. So that's so of course there's all that. But someone locally to me that struggled and still struggles like everybody else, trying to find and keep good people. He really broke that down for me. He's all about numbers, and he was just saying all these things about all of the all the applicants, all the interviews, all the people. You whittle that down, like hundreds of people, down to like a handful of people that actually showed up for an interview, and then less of them that actually came to work the first day, and less of that even stayed past the first week. And it's just like this constant cycle. But what I took away from that was that he just didn't stop. Like, he heard somewhere something that, like, whatever your pain point is or whatever your biggest struggle is, just invest all your time and energy in it. So that's what he did. He put a ton of money in it. He sponsored I'm a big fan of Indeed, and he was using Indeed as well. I think a lot of people just use Indeed in general. It's one of the biggest, job applicants or whatever out there. So I just like a lot of things about it. The way it's structured and all the applicants and all that kind of stuff. But at any rate, you can spend a lot of money to sponsor all like your job. So it's always at the top of research list, and it stays relevant, and they give you access to more things, for you to actually go through applications and resumes and see
getting
who
to
you
invite
want
people to apply that look qualified.
Correct. Yeah. So there's a lot of benefits to that. And he just kept investing. I think like maybe 1 month he invested up to like $500, to get all of these. I think actually he talked to Indeed. That's what it was. He talked to Indeed, and he's like, what do I got to do to get more applicants? And they're like, oh, you got to spend about $500, like that's a good budget, and so he just went all in, and that's how slowly but surely over the course of one season, he finally started building up his crews to a good number. And of course there's always that back and forth. People are going to leave and you got to find new people, but you just have to keep the momentum. You can't like just do it and then stop. Oh, we got good people, and then stop, and then all of a sudden you start losing people. Like, you have to constantly kind of keep the bench. Yeah, you got to keep the pedal down constantly when it comes to staffing. It's just one of those things to keep your team strong. You're always going to, just like with your clients, you don't want to stop putting out quotes for the right people in the right places for the right services. You want to keep, because there's always going to be bottom people that you can filter out and fill in those holes. Same thing with staffing. You can always find room for good people. I remember that from retail too. We never stopped not hiring. Like, we never stopped hiring. We always had like now hiring available everywhere. Yeah. At some of the companies I worked for, because that was a thing, like you can always make room for good people. So you don't want to deny potentially good people by saying, no, we're not hiring right now. Like always have people apply, because you never know who you're going to find. So
yeah,
just some things like that. Just basically, make sure that you are only searching and don't let up, really, is what it comes down to.
To loop it back around to the systems conversation we were having, the Indeed ecosystem does kind of function as a like full hiring system you can integrate into your company. From, you rewrite your job description to be really good. You then are filtering applicants as they come in. You're paying to promote it there. The thing I really like is the automated phone interview, where it asks them 3, pretty simple questions, but one of them is about conflict in the workplace. And we do, if people listening don't know this, we do Indeed hiring ads for companies. So I can't tell you how many guys have applied for lawn care tech positions and disqualified themselves in the automated phone interview. Like, I handle conflict in the workplace by getting into fist fights.
Yeah,
like,
right. Just they'll say the darndest things.
Yeah, man.
Seriously.
The first time it happened, I was like, whoa, this is crazy. And I was telling everyone. And then it happened again and again. And I was like, okay, cool. People are just gonna let me know.
Yeah.
So, I appreciate the honesty.
Yeah.
I can't refer you
know,
on.
right?
I think it's a liability issue for my company at that point.
Right.
But it's a whole system you can plug into the business and take a lot of hiring off your plate. Because if you can get someone to disqualify themselves in an automated phone interview, then that's one less in-person interview you had to have where they told you something crazy like that.
Right.
So I think that's, we can plug that system right in this spring and start hiring before the rush hits.
Absolutely.
Yeah. We talked about a couple months ago, Robert and I talked about like the best time to hire is when all your competitors are laying people off.
Yeah.
So we're coming to the end of that. You really need to start staffing up if you're going to be ready for the spring.
Yeah. Well, I already went through, I had about 80 something applications in a course of like 2 to 3 weeks. I went through 80 something applications, reached out to about a dozen of them to set up for interviews out of those 80 something. And out of those, 3 people agreed to come to an interview. 2 showed up. I only hired 1. So it's just like, man, so like, but you just have to keep getting after it, and it's not like I need 50 people. So fortunately, but if I did, I would just need to keep getting after it. But still, like I keep updating my application, make sure that, that it's still relevant and still out there and I'm still collecting more people. But yeah, cause right now everyone's, or soon people are going to start looking for work, and this is that time. So you got to figure that out. So
yeah. Well, Naylor, thank you so much for coming on the show, man. You're one of my favorite guests to have on.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that. I always enjoy having a good conversation, talking shop.
Yeah, man.